usually see is a dog who is absolutely fine off leash, but on leash goes crazy. What if the dog was actually fine on leash, but would go lunging, barking, growling at other people and some other dogs off leash? Today, we're going to talk about Beano. Beano is a 3-year-old mix, or maybe not even a mix, maybe it's just a straight dog, we don't really know. But Beano's history is not known. It's a huge unknown factor. We have no idea what Beano had experienced in his previous life, if there were any experiences with people, or bad experiences, or good experiences even. We only know how Beano is acting now. And in the beginning, Beano was pretty fearful of many things. So it seems like he doesn't have that much experience with different things. He was afraid of a lot of household appliances. So he was a little bit afraid of the TV. He got startled when the TV got turned on in the beginning. He was afraid of a mixer. He was afraid of the sound the fridge makes when you open the door. And typically we see exactly the other way around, right? We usually see dogs who come running whenever the fridge gets opened because they try to grab something that falls to the ground, or they know that their food is in there, or whatever. So typically this is a sound that triggers a positive emotion. For Beano, it was just something he supposedly never had experienced before. For him, it was just a weird sound. All those things were weird sounds. The vacuum, of course, that's kind of cliche, but it was an issue for him as well. But those things he got used to pretty fast. He was very eager to learn. He was pretty open to his owners, and he was curious. And curiosity is always awesome for learning. It sometimes gets our dogs into trouble when they are really curious and we haven't gotten a handle on watching them yet, but for learning, it's awesome. So Beano learned very fast, and he was having fun with it. So he was not the type of dog who would run away and hide under some kind of furniture for days after getting startled. He would get startled, jump a little bit away, and then get curious right away and come looking, especially when the humans just talked to him and invited him in a very friendly voice to come to them. So they added a little bit of giving him a treat here and there, but often it wasn't even necessary. His curiosity just took him into the danger zone, if you will, and just made him brave. And the same thing happened on leash. He didn't know how to walk on leash. He didn't know a harness. He was just not used to any of that. So his humans trained that in the beginning, and they had a beautiful house and garden. So in the beginning, Beano would just go out in the yard and do his business and get back in. They didn't have any pressure or stress getting him used to leashes and harnesses and all those things. But of course, they wanted to walk with their dogs. So they started training, and that was another thing that Beano learned extremely quickly. Again, his curiosity just pushed him a little bit in the right direction, and treats and rewards were just everything that was needed to finish the job. So Beano learned that within a couple of days or a week or so really quickly. And Beano's parents were awesome. They both contributed to training. They both were on the same page, and they were really eager too. So they were having fun together. It was just a game they played and they liked it, so learning happened really fast for them as well as Beano. And they also took the time to really introduce Beano to what it means when the leash gets tight. So you can never prevent that fully, right? But if we have a puppy and we teach that puppy or a rescue dog, and we teach a rescue dog right from the beginning that tension on the leash means come to me, everything's okay. On one hand, will they not panic? And a lot of dogs, when they experience pressure on the leash the first time, they panic. And if you introduce that very slowly and with as little pressure as possible, it's again a fun game. And the dog can learn that tension on the leash means come to your human. And that prevents pulling right away. That a dog who has learned that will never pull. That's not the entire truth, because sometimes dogs get motivated by different things and then they will forget what they learned, or puberty strikes and they forget what they learned. But the odds are way better than if we wait until the dog's pulling and then try to train it. So if you have a newly adopted rescue dog who doesn't walk on leash yet, keep that in mind. It's a game changer. All right? But back to Beano. The whole training process was connected with so much fun and so many positive emotions for Beano. He had not made any negative experiences. He had only associated a leash and harness with good things. So this was what gave him a sense of safety. Also, he didn't have any bad experiences with his humans, so they were his rock as well. So when things got scary for Beano, his humans were there and they really supported him. They never belittled him. They never not took him seriously in his fear. They just supported him. They also didn't pity him. They were just there for him, which is awesome. And it's not that easy. I know. Sometimes we just get annoyed by all the things the dog doesn't know, and we just want to go from A to B in a halfway quickly kind of pace. But the dog's preventing that because the dog has to process all the things. And that sometimes isn't easy. But they did it in a really, really great way. So Beano had the perfect ground for leash walks. He had connected positive emotions to everything involved in a walk. But again, there were so many things Beano didn't know because he hadn't seen the area before, right? He was transported in a crate in a car to his family, so he hadn't seen anything from the outside world. He only had experienced smells in the backyard, so some surely will have drifted from the street, and he did know cars. He didn't get startled by those, so in his previous life, he most likely had learned what cars are, and he was pretty friendly with other dogs most of the time. His parents took him to an off-leash park once, but there were many dogs there, and it felt kind of tense in there. So Beano wasn't acting his usual easygoing self. He was very laid back. He was very careful around these dogs, and he would stay mostly with his parents, so they decided that this wasn't a good fit for him, which is again awesome. But they did have friends with dogs, so they met with them, and that was alright for Beano. He loved to just meet other dogs and he played with them, and he also learned a really good recall within no time. So they could walk together and let the dogs run off leash, which was awesome. But that was when they realized that there was actually an issue they hadn't seen before. Beano would react to other people off leash. Sometimes dogs, but rarely. More often it was more like if the people had a dog with them, it was fine. If the people did not have a dog with them, it was not fine. Beano would run up to them very fast, so it was more a lunging than a running, and he would bark. He would not approach them completely, but he would bark and he would growl, and he almost looked like a feral dog. And that was when he was completely out of reach for his parents. They could call for him, they could invite him to come, he wouldn't listen. Of course not, because he was already in the zone, he was already minding his own business, which was, in his opinion, more important at that moment than his parents, because they were too far away to give him any support, and he had to do that all by himself, and he didn't know how to, so he started barking. Again, this is not uncommon, right? We very often see dogs who don't know how to handle a situation, so they just either try to get away or they start barking, so telling the other one to go away. It's a safety mechanism and it's completely normal, but most of the time we don't want that, right? So Beano's parents needed a solution because Beano was really wonderful off leash, except for that particular situation, and they didn't want to take that away from him and keep him on leash. Again, on leash he was fine. He would just go to his parents and sometimes hide behind them. Sometimes they would just walk a curve and everything was fine. So they only needed a solution for the off leash part. And since they knew, they had a really good feeling for that dog. It was really awesome. And they knew the distance that Beano would still listen to them and the threshold that made the difference between listening and not listening. So they already had a marker signal. And what they started to introduce was a border cue. I just call it that. Maybe there are different words for it. The purpose of this cue is that we can tell the dog that he or she shouldn't move further away from us than he or she is right now. It's most easily introduced with a long line because we can just give the cue a little bit before the end of the leash. And I like to just say end. And most dogs, if they're not too distracted, will just recognize your voice and turn toward you. And that's what you can capture with the marker signal. Again, since Beano had a wonderful recall and was fine off leash, we skipped the long line and immediately moved to off leash. The most important part for making the learning easy for our dogs is that the distraction is not too intense, all right? And this can mean that there is not much wildlife around. This can mean that there are not many dogs around. It's different for every dog. It depends on what your dog sees as distraction. For Beano, he was kind of interested in wildlife, but not very intensely. And it was the same thing for other dogs. So they just started in a pretty quiet area. They didn't walk in a very busy area anyway. So they started there, and Beano had learned it within, I would say, 5 reps. It was incredible. And yes, you can use your usual attention signal every single time, but the difference is that with the end cue, your dog doesn't really have to look at you. With an attention signal, I want my dog to look at me. So that's why I use both. And when I want to keep my dog around me and not move further away from me, I use the end cue. And again, we can use different rewards. For Beano, we used food in the beginning and nose work, but they pretty quickly shifted to just verbal praise because that was enough for Beano after he had realized what his people wanted from him, right? And that was pretty much all they needed, because from that moment on, they always used the end cue when Beano was getting close to the threshold where he wouldn't listen anymore. And again, after some time of doing this over and over again at always the same distance, Beano would keep the distance all by himself. They didn't have to say anything anymore. And whenever he saw a stranger, he would fixate a little bit, so he was pretty easy to read. And his parents would just call him and he would run up to them and the world was perfect again. So it was all they needed. Sometimes it's just a tiny little thing that is introduced within days, and that's all that is needed for making life, even with a very hard to live with problem, a lot easier, right? Because if you have a dog who runs up to people and barks at them, people most likely don't react that friendly towards you because they get scared, right? And it's uncomfortable for them, and they will tell you that in a more or less friendly way. So this is a kind of, at least an awkward situation, right? And we want to avoid that. But for Beano, it was this tiny little thing they needed, and everything was fine again. Of course, since he is a very curious dog, they can introduce people to him and just teach him that people are awesome. But the generalization part of socialization is closed. It's a window that puppies have where they can learn person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are awesome. That means that person 6 will be awesome as well. That's generalization. An adult dog will not make that connection. An adult dog will assess every person freshly. But of course, since the experiences are good, the reaction will become less and less and less. So I'm curious, have you ever had something so little make such a huge difference with your dog? Tell me in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or put it in a review if you're watching on Spotify or Apple Podcast or whatever. I would love to read those. Again, comments, reviews, likes, all those things help more people find the show and help more people enjoy their dogs again. So you can contribute to that, which is absolutely awesome. And I want to appreciate you, and I want to say thank you for doing so. That's it. I wish you a lot of fun training, and we'll see each other next time. Bye.